Hi everyone, Sajid Amit here and welcome to my review of Meze Audio's flagship headphone, the Meze Elite Tungsten. Now it's called tungsten because of the way it looks. So it's an aesthetic distinction. It's not any different from your regular Meze Elite. Insofar as I can tell, and I'm certain I'm right. If you have different information, do correct me, but this is the Meze Audio Elite. So, although while I have a Meze Audio Tungsten in my hand, which has this beautiful gunmetal-like shade, this review would apply for any Meze Audio Elite headphone. And in case you're wondering, yes, this is the same headphone as the Meze Audio Elite Empyrean. So this is not the Empyrean, this is the Empyrean Elite. And what you should take from that is that this is an upgrade to the Empyrean, and in many ways it is, but I just want to say that because I own the Empyrean as well, which is an amazing headphone, it might not be an upgrade for everyone. I just want to say that because I feel like that needs to be said. And while I figure out the right and the left so I can put this on my hand, it's certainly not on my hands, is it? On my head. I'm sorry. I've had a very long week. And I'm ready to go on some travels. So basically, I need to get this review out. Okay. Now, I have this on my head, and it doesn't feel like I have something on my head because you see this very, very soft and cushiony and pillowy pads. And I miss these roomy and pillowy pads on these Elites because these Elites, like, they have the leather pads on right now. I mean, they're nowhere near as cushiony and as soft. Of course, this is not leather. This is velour. And they also have a form of velour Alcantara pads as well. But what they've done with the Elite is just made this less comfortable. So it's not as cushiony and pillowy as this. It is thinner. But this, I think, does do something to restrain the sound in a way that makes it a little more neutral, which was one of the complaints some of the mainstream reviewers had about this. Although I do want to say, a lot of you audiophiles love this headphone, this one, and you own it, and you would not replace this for anything else. And I know that because the Meze Audio Elite is great, and it is an upgrade, but the Meze Empyrean sold a ton, and everyone and his mother loved it. And I know, so I mean, you have two kinds of people, right? Two kinds of audiophiles. You have those who prefer a more neutral tuning for whatever that's worth. And neutral doesn't mean anything. I don't think we should be conflating neutral with the Harman reference graph, which is exactly what it is, based on a very limited sample size. And the researcher and the sampler in me has oftentimes in various videos pointed out the sampling limitations of the Harman reference curve, or the sampling limitations with which the graph was arrived at. So it should be taken with a bucket load of salt. If you watch my campfire trifecta video, I have spent a lot of time discussing why the graph should not be the be-all and end-all, and your HRTF and how the headphone couples with your head, your anatomy of your inner ear canal, all have an effect on how you perceive the frequency response, in particular treble. So, do check that out. Check the review out. It's the campfire trifecta review. It's an IM, but I do get into some discussion at length on why the FR from the Harman reference curve should not be considered the be-all and end-all. And I was heartened to see a lot of my fellow reviewers, people that I respect and look up to, especially Resolve, Andrew of Headphones.com. I've never met Andrew. He seems like an amazing guy because he's genuinely interested in the hobby, and I respect him. And I respect Headphones.com as well for how they handle their business. And they have my friend Cameron there, which I keep referring to Cameron occasionally when I talk about DACs, of course, because he's like the DAC guru. Anyway, all that being said, I was gladdened to see in some of their recent live discussions that they are questioning that sort of approach and the approach of tonal correctness being associated with the Harman FR graph. And as usual, I've digressed away from the review, but bear with me because I will be drawing comparisons between the Elite and the Focal Utopia, which is slightly more expensive. The Focal Utopia comes in at $5,000. Elite is $4,000. And I also want to draw a comparison with the Focal Clears because these are my perennial favorites. Guys, if you found the right DAC and amp to drive it with, the Focal Clear sounds absolutely amazing. Gone are the treble grain. Gone are the upper mid forwardness. Gone are the sort of little bit of scoop it has in the lower mids. And it becomes a really amazing headphone. And the chain I'm going to recommend, which is going to be an insane chain for a lot of you, I'm still going to go out and recommend it because it just sounds awesome. I just want you to know, is the Mola Tambaki DAC you have behind me. Because that DAC is a mother lover of a performer. It has an amazing natural mid-range tonal weight, which makes the lower mids sound fuller. And it's got great stage depth forward to back, so it does sound like the vocals are not as protruding. And then it has an enormously beautiful, sparkly, yet very, very natural and analogish treble, which does wonders to the treble here, and it doesn't have any metallic sheen. This on this setup sounds like what the Susvara should sound like, I kid you not. Not in terms of technical performance. Susvara is a little more textured and nuanced and more resolving headphone, but in terms of tonality. Okay, with that being said, so you're going to see a shootout between the Elite and these three headphones, the Empyrean, the 4Cal Utopia, and the 4Cal Clear. And I'll draw references to the Susvara as well, because a lot of you, including myself, have over time at different points in our journey sort of considered Susvara to be a reference headphone, and with good reason. Okay, so with all that being said, let's start the review. I mean, the review has started, in case you didn't notice, but in a proper breakdown of, let's say, aesthetics, build, and comfort, moving on to discussion on tonality, and then finally technical performance. Guys, aesthetics-wise, it's very similar to the Meze Empyrean, except, like I said, the Meze Empyrean leather and velour pads are thicker, and that does have a bearing on the sound, and as far as I can tell, it brings out the bass more. These thicker pads do. And of course, it's better for all-day listening, although these are fairly comfortable as well. In general, for comfort, I would say the Meze headphones are perhaps the most comfortable headphones on the planet, especially if you sit and listen to music, which is how I assume most audiophiles in portable audio listen to music. I, on the other hand, like to lie down and listen to music because I do get neck spasms if I wear headphones for too long. So I do lie down and listen to music. And for that sort of use case, that's just a minority of you perhaps. But if there's someone out there who likes to lie down and listen to music, I think the ergonomics are fantastic, but because this has enormous cup swivel, when it's fresh out of the box, it doesn't, but it still has a fair amount of cup swivel. It can be somewhat finicky, and if you want to lie down and listen to music, this actually has better ergonomics because great weight distribution, so you're not going to feel the weight, but then it clamps nicely, and it does allow you to move right a little bit. You tilt your head in different angles. So if you lie down and listen to music like I do, I think it's still a great headphone, but of course I'm the minority here, and I think more people listen to music sitting up, in which case this headphone, the Empyrean, and its upgrade is also amazing in terms of comfort. Build quality wise, I think this is just phenomenal. You have carbon fiber here. You have this enormously comfortable strap here. You have this beautiful looking Renaro drivers, and it just looks and feels so sturdy. Like every little bit is put together with such calculated precision and such finesse and such premiumness that I think there is not a single other headphone that I think can rival this for build quality. The 4Cal Utopia and Clear do look as premium, perhaps if not more, but they've had failure rates, especially the Utopia, whereas this does not have a known failure rate as such because this hasn't failed a lot of people that have owned it. Okay, so the other thing worth mentioning is I think the architecture of the Empyrean Elite. If you look at how this was figured out, like the way this outer headband creates a level of clamp, which is just right. Just look at the design here. It looks, I don't look normal, of course, when I wear this. I look funny, I know. But just to understand how unique this design is, how avant-garde, how out of the box this design is, just thinking about that, it just makes me wonder why the Meze headphones have not won some serious design awards. Because the engineering and the design is honestly phenomenal. Like, just look at this. It's got cup swivel. It's got, this beautiful way of adjusting the size to fit your headphones. To fit your head, and just a very unique design that works so well. And I dare say is aesthetic in a sense. It's a bit, it's a bit crazy and out there, but it's still in an interesting avant-garde artistic sort of a way, very pleasing to me, especially to look at this headphone. Like it grabs attention. If you show this to a non-audiophile person, the person will look at this and will ask you a question and will go home and talk about this. We'll want to take a picture of this. So that has some value, I think, because this has stopped and made many newbie audiophiles take the hobby more seriously. And when I started out, a lot of people would be like, hey, I see the Meze Empyrean. There was a darker review that I think broke the internet as far as audiophile reviews go. I mean, you never really break the internet with an audiophile review because we have, 40,000 people who are serious audiophiles, like in portable audio. But yeah, it got massive views, and everyone and his mother at that point onwards was just, praising the Meze Empyrean for its looks. And there are various versions of the Empyrean in terms of aesthetics. There's a Phoenix version that I think has red on it, and there are other versions. So these are just some stunningly designed headphones. I can't rave enough about their build quality, their aesthetics, and their comfort. Engineering marvels. Mr. Antonio Meze is a genius when it comes to design. He is just a genius. Okay, the drivers are Renaro drivers, and they're made out of Ukraine. And when you move to the Elites, I have it on good authority that these drivers have a lower level of distortion, which should subjectively and perhaps objectively be a good thing. And this is 102 decibels of sensitivity, so it's fairly sensitive. You can literally drive this off a dongle, although you might not get the bass at its best. And it's got impedance of around, I think, 32 ohms, which is pretty standard for headphones. So that's about it in terms of its specs and design and comfort and all that, right? Now, and its weight is around 400 grams, I think. Okay, so it's very manageable. Tonality-wise, you got two kinds of audiophiles. You have people who, I think, genuinely are three kinds of audiophiles. Let me walk that back. Three kinds of audiophiles. One, people who genuinely like a forward upper mid, the Harman sound, which is essentially a forward upper mid, a rolled off treble, and bass. So I like bass, but the Harman sound does have more mid bass and lower mids. I'm sorry, the Harman sound does not have mid bass and lower mids. It has sub bass, it has upper mids, a pretty smooth transition to upper mids, quite a lot of upper mids, and then it's got a rolled off treble. We in the hobby, when we began, a lot of us were chasing the Harman target because that's what a lot of senior reviewers had us do. Not my current generation, people who are still reviewing, but even reviewers before them. Because the understanding was somewhat and it was misleading, I think, that this is how everything should sound like. So a lot of people were not willing to question that. And people who like to get into science, not because they were scientists, but because perhaps that was an avenue for them, the only avenue for them to talk about science, they got into it and they started sort of embracing this absolutism of this graph, the Harman graph. So there are people who have embraced it and who like that kind of sound. And I've talked to people like that. And I have been one of those persons at different points in my audio journey, except my tastes evolve depending on how and what I listen to. I do get bored of one type of sound, which is, I think, a good thing for me. So those people like the Harman target curve because they like sub bass, which I do. They haven't developed the experience to like lower mids, I think, or a lot of lower mids, and they find it bloaty even when I don't think it's particularly bloaty, but that's just my subjective take on their subjective take. So those guys also like upper mids because, like, electric guitar, for example, sound like the attack is a little more prominent, and it does make it more exciting because if you pull back upper mids a bit, the overall presentation can become somewhat boring. They also sometimes don't like treble and they like their roll off. So the Harman curve does satisfy a lot of you, and which is absolutely fine. Then there are others who like a different kind of sound. They like more body to the sound. Most Harman tuned headphones and IEMs don't have body to their sound. They don't have tonal density. They don't have thickness. Now, these headphones do. The Meze headphones always have note weight and body. And me, in my audio journey, as I've evolved, I have over time learned to like and appreciate body. I hope this doesn't become a meme, but body more and more, right? So I do like that note weight, that tonal density much more now than I used to. Because when I was younger in my audio journey, I was chasing technicalities, clarity, and I just wanted to get sound and more bang for the buck. Now that I've settled down in this hobby a lot more, I appreciate build quality, I appreciate comfort, aesthetics, and body, note weight, tonal density. So these headphones have body and note weight, right? And when you do that, you do sacrifice on something. So what you sacrifice on in this case is clarity. So the way you get note weight and body is you have a greater lower mid to upper mid ratio. If you want more clarity, you have a greater upper mid to lower mid ratio, right? So that's what's going on with these headphones. That's why you have different kinds of audiophiles in this community, some of whom who like, love, or loathe these Meze headphones. Tonality wise, these have body. Now this is something that has a lot of cup swivel because it's not exactly a new headphone. But anyway, so this headphone is the Meze Empyrean. This is the Meze Elite. They both have a lot of body and note weight. The Empyrean has a little more powerful sub bass. This also has a straight up, solid, extended sub bass and a lovely mid bass as well. Some of you will want to EQ down the mid bass. I'm not one of them. And as a matter of fact, I love the mid bass and lower mid transition because I know how to pair this with the right sources so that the mid bass or the lower mids don't sound bloaty to me. The upper mids here are a little more prominent than on the Meze Empyrean, but yet they're not as prominent as on the Focal Clears or as on the Harman Target Curve. So overall what you get is you get a very extended bass, you get a little more mid bass energy, and then you get a pinna gain, which is perhaps not as energetic as Harman or tuned headphones tend to be. And then you get some energy past mid treble, especially going up to upper treble, and you get a lot of air and this enormity of sound stage that you get with this. Now, that's a good transition, I think, to talking about technical performance because these are massively staging headphones. Now, I don't think they're as wide or as, as the king of soundstage, which happens to be the Sennheiser HD800. They're not as wide, but they have a more rounded soundstage, right? And they have a large soundstage. So it's large in terms of height as well. And the HD800 also has a high, tall soundstage, but this might actually have a taller soundstage, right? The tallness of the stage here reminds me of the Headphone Aria. So it's tall, it's wide, and it's deep, and it's a lovely spherical sort of shaped soundstage. Technical performance-wise, other than soundstage, it does imaging fairly well. Imaging is also a function of the frequency response to a degree. So because this has mid-bass, it will not image perhaps as cogently as a Focal Clear or Focal Utopia. Now, this is, of course, a $1,500 headphone. Currently can be had for $800 at headphones.com. So you might be wondering why the hell would a headphone at this price point rival a headphone at this price point for imaging? And you'd be right in asking that. But of course, guys, these are minute differences, very small percentage points. And at this level of headphones between $1,500, you're only dealing with small percentage points, guys, right? So I hope you understand that, because what this loses out on imaging vis-a-vis, let's say, the Clear and the Utopia, the differential is not as substantial as the differential between its staging capabilities and the staging capabilities of the Clear or the Utopia. So let's say this is a 7 for imaging, or 7.5, or let's say 8 for imaging. This is perhaps a 7. Now, if this is an 8, this is perhaps an 8.5. It's not like a 10 or anything, right? So you only get a 50 basis points difference between a Focal Clear and a Utopia. This is just a random subjective assessment. I haven't figured out the math really, but just to show you, these are very minute differences. However, in terms of stage, if this is like an 8, this is perhaps a 6.75. So the difference in staging capability is greater. Now, in terms of dynamics and speed, the Renaro drivers are fairly fast. They're planar, but they also have beautiful dynamics. A lot of planar headphones don't have great punch and slam. This is a dynamically very powerful headphone, so you get great punch and slam. And the louder parts of a passage will sound loud, as it should. The quieter parts of a passage sound quieter, and the distinction between the loudness and the quietness is substantial, which is an indication of the dynamic strength and power and potency of a headphone, and this is very dynamic. Not as dynamic as a Meze Empyrean OG, I have to say, but very dynamic nonetheless. Okay, so what I want to say here, guys, is timbre is interesting, because timbre is, of course, a function of the technology of the driver. And planar drivers have a certain timbre, especially in the bass. There isn't a single planar driver that does bass the way a Utopia or a ZMF does, which are dynamic drivers. Even the bass of a Sennheiser headphone has certain timbre because of dynamic driver that I think honestly makes it sound more natural in the bass. Now, these planars actually have very good timbre for bass, but it's still very planar-like in the bass. Mids, I think, are less susceptible to timbre. They can be, but mids generally are more difficult to get wrong, I think, timbrally for headphones at this price point. So mids are perfect timbrely, and treble is just wonderful timbrely. As a matter of fact, I think when it comes to treble, planar headphones sometimes have a better timbral performance than I think dynamic drivers do. Okay, so that's overall discussion on what this sounds like. Now, to do a quick A/B, this headphone is slightly more neutral than the Empyrean. This does not have the same level of sub-bass kick. This does not have the same level of lower-mid romanticism. This has a little more clarity, more resolution, if that matters to you. In many ways, this is a more resolving version of this, with a little more less bass, and a smoother treble. Now, to compare this with the Focal Clears, guys, the Clears are my perennial favorite, but this has, I think, a very close level of resolution and a little more tactile punch and slam. The attack is a little more interesting when it comes to drum hits and those sorts of things. In many ways, it's a little more dynamic, I would even say. The sub-bass punch is just guttural and visceral, and it's a little more textured and a little more realistic. But again, it doesn't really have the soundstage that this does. This is like huge and holographic, and in that it does sound a lot more premium than the Focal Clear does, but then the Clear does scale for me on my setup with this Kind tube preamp and with this Euphoria, which is a tube amp. So I tube it twice and I get an amazing stage with this. But anyway, this is in stock form, a superior headphone, no doubt, I think, to the Focal Clears, although whether you want the Clear or the Elite is, of course, a subjective thing even then. Utopia is a $5,000 headphone and perhaps a very worthy competitor to the Elite. Though Utopia was a worthy competitor to the Empyrean. But I think overall, the Utopia has a bit of a 6 kilohertz. It can sound a bit grating there. It's very amp-picky. It's got punch and slam, but doesn't have the sub-bass extension that this does. It's still very narrow sounding compared to this one. Has more stage depth though. And overall, I'm not a huge fan of the Utopia treble, especially the 2022 version, like as you might have figured from my other videos. So all that to say, I would take the Elite, although the Utopia is more resolving, a little more resolving perhaps than the Focal Clears as well. Guys, this is a pretty safe headphone. I mean, there are people who are going to say that this is not a safe headphone and this is not a typical headphone and perhaps it's too warm or what have you, but I think it's a pretty safe headphone and a pretty good headphone because it does nothing wrong. This is perhaps a really flawless headphone at Summit Fi levels. And in that, it reminds me of the LCD5 because the LCD5 is another flawless Summit Fi headphone. But the LCD5 is a flawless Summit Fi headphone if you like Harman. This is a flawless Summit Fi headphone if you're adventurous and if you don't mind something that deviates from Harman. So in many ways, the LCD5 and the Meze Elite are the yin and the yang. And they're both, in many ways, in different ways, flawless Summit Fi headphones. So that's it, guys. I do recommend this quite confidently. Although I do want to say that if you are obsessed about clarity in upper mids, and if you are allergic to lower mids, this may or may not be for you, so you might want to audition first, as always. Sajid Ahmed signing out. If you like this video, give this a like. If you like my work, follow my channel and stay tuned for my next one. Bye-bye.